I wasn't going to say anything, but I think it's really high time that I address this rash of violence against Asian Americans that Donald Trump has fomented. Just kidding. Um, I really have been trying to not address this issue because I, where the hell did it come from? Just out of left field. It was something that the media threw out there, and I didn't think that it was a narrative that was going to stick. But lo and behold, here I am speaking about it, and it's been, a few days at least, or maybe a couple weeks since it's been a couple weeks since they started saying this. And the first time it really went on my radar was when Biden said something about it in his speech. I thought, what a weird out of left field thing to bring up. But they're really trying to hammer this narrative home. And I just don't understand it, why it's coming, a year after Trump said China virus, and now that he's out of office and less relevant than he's been in years, they're trying to come back and, and say, Trump is inciting violence against Asian Americans. In fact, I remember very briefly when the virus thing started out that they tried to do this, but it was very clearly a ploy coming from China. And agents of the Chinese Communist Party were saying, if you talk about the virus, that's racism against Chinese people. And in fact, you had some people in the United States, who was it? There was, anyway, various folks saying, hey, go enjoy Chinese New Year. Come to Chinatown. Don't be a racist. And so they tried this last time, but it didn't work because then people got very, scared about the virus. But now you have the same people who are scared about the virus. Now they're trying to bring up this now they're not saying anti-Chinese. Now they're saying anti-Asian. So I guess they're trying to target people in the U.S. who aren't necessarily of Chinese descent, and try and make them feel victimized. And to be honest, I think this is one of the creepiest coordinated media campaigns that I've ever seen, because it feels so forced and unnatural, that it's just so obviously being coordinated between these media folks, because they can't all seriously have just started thinking that this was a problem at the exact same time. It doesn't make any sense. Because it was literally one day nobody talked about this, and then the next day every news outlet was discussing this every day. And people have said, well, more Asians than voted for Trump than they were expecting in 2020. And so the Democrats are trying to win back Asian voters by having an Asian Lives Matter news cycle, just like the numerous Black Lives Matter news cycles. Because I think that there are a lot of people, probably in the mainstream of the Democratic Party, your establishment types who care about winning, who realize that last year all of the BLM riots and the BLM, being the year of BLM, alienated some of the non-black minorities from the Democratic caucus, and you saw large defections, mainly in the Hispanic camp, and of course they're a much larger voting bloc than Asians anyway. But, I guess there is, in certain parts of California, which doesn't matter because California is going to vote Democrat regardless, I guess certain Asian communities, the non-Chinese Asians, your more traditional entrepreneurial small business owner type of Asians, started to move towards, they slightly back towards the Republicans, which traditionally, your Asian immigrant types were Republican voters. But again, considering how small of a voting bloc they are, and the fact that this was observed largely in California, where Republicans don't matter, period, I don't see that this was enough to justify this media campaign. I mean, I could see much more likely a Hispanic Lives Matter news cycle, where they're talking about how Trump supporters are, committing violence against Mexicans or something. Scare the Hispanics into not voting Republican again, like they did in 2020. But the Asian thing, just, again, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint, like from a news standpoint. It doesn't make sense from a Machiavellian, public, perception manipulation standpoint. I always think back to Justin Raimondo's pinned tweet, which I don't know if it's still up because, he's passed away now, but his pinned tweet for a long time was just two simple words: who benefits? And that wasn't in reference to anything in particular. That was just a question that you have to ask yourself when it comes to, every news narrative, every media narrative. You have to ask yourself who benefits, and that is going to, tell you a lot more about the news than you'll ever learn from CNN or Fox or ABC or what have you. And so I've been trying to do this. I mean, it's part of the reason why I haven't talked about this, because I just haven't figured it out, and now I'm throwing my hands up. Because I don't know. Who does benefit from this? Even if, the Asians became even more democratic in how they vote anyway, which, they vote pretty heavily for the Democrats right now. I don't understand, I feel like all these resources could have been much better spent trying to win over Hispanics. Of course, I guess I should briefly mention, though I have to be careful since I am still on YouTube, what I say about this situation, but the shooter, which, can I even say that word on YouTube anymore? Anyway, the guy who committed acts of violence against the so-called Atlanta spas, which I don't usually call those spas. I mean those strip center Asian massage places are kind of seedy. I'm not going to lionize them too much. Not that they deserve to die or anything like that. I'm not saying that. Those are typically kind of sketchy places that I would not go personally, because well, what goes on in those places. Anyway, this guy probably riled up by the FBI, just like all mass shooters. You notice, by the way, a few years ago, all your mass shooters guys or domestic terrorist types, your lone wolves, were Muslims. Now, they're all incels, basically, single white males. Don't you find that a bit odd? Don't you think there'd be, if you have, if this really is an organic occurrence, that these guys just get mad one day and they snap and they say, I have to go kill a bunch of people. Don't you think there'd be some incels and Muslims mixed in? It wouldn't just be one day they were all Muslims, and then one day it just stopped and they were all incels. Doesn't that make you think that maybe there's a little more to the story than what we're seeing? Maybe there's behind the scenes, these guys are being riled up by, a third party on the internet, because we know that this is how it always happens, as we're told, oh, these guys are radicalized on the internet. Why is it one day that all of a sudden, all the people who were being radicalized into going to murder people were Muslims, and then it switched? Okay, white male Americans without girlfriends. It seems like a weird 180 to me. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. I think maybe I should start making BitChute exclusive videos, because I really am censoring myself quite a lot on YouTube these days, because they have been taking down some of my older videos. They haven't given me any strikes yet, but, I've had a couple videos taken down, and it's made me think twice about speaking my mind, so maybe I should start doing BitChute exclusives. Maybe I could do one where I discuss this phenomenon of the lone wolf shooter, and how they all seem to play perfectly into whatever the media narrative of the day happens to be. It's just a funny thing. All of a sudden, while the media decides to just randomly bring up this anti-Asian hate crime epidemic thing, which nobody's ever seen any evidence of, really, which the whole last year, well, you would think it would be very early on, when people were really, really scared of the virus, especially the right-wingers. Back when the right-wingers were scared of the violence and we were told that it was racist to be scared of the violence, that's when you would have expected the right-wingers to be committing anti-Asian hate crimes. But now, a year later, when the right-wingers are the ones who are the least concerned about the virus, you have, for the first time that I know of, a supposedly racist anti-Asian mass shooting committed by a white male, when most of these so-called hate crimes are being committed by non-white people. I won't say what color, because I don't want to get, I don't know if YouTube will like that, but there are people of a certain color, which I don't think that's what matters when it comes to crimes. I don't care whether you do it, whether you rob someone because you hate them or you just want their money, you still rob someone. It's no worse. It's no better. If somebody says, hey, I totally respect that we are of different skin colors, but I want to murder you anyway. That doesn't make you any less dead. But anyway, leaving all this aside, everything that I've discussed today has made me very, I think you might be able to tell, I'm a little bit suspicious of this media narrative about anti-Asian hate crimes. It's really weird. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what the ultimate end goal with this is. I mean, where does this go? How is it resolved? How long are they going to keep this up? I mean, we're not near an election. It's not like there's some special election going on in a district that has a heavy Asian population that I know of. So, obviously, I'm pretty confused. And if any of you have any thoughts on what might be the bigger motivations behind this, what might be going on, what the reasoning behind all this is, please let me know in the comments, because I don't have, I never have all the answers, but today I don't really have any answers. It's quite perplexing. So with that said, I think I'll leave it here for today.